Hey, good morning. Got a warehouse distribution center behind me in the picture here. Since today we're going to talk about warehousing and distribution. Some news first, though. Let's start with a piece here on the right. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Orient Overseas Container Line, OOCL, one of the top 4 shipping companies in the world, reported $4.88 billion in revenue in the fourth quarter of 2020. 101% increase in revenue on a decrease in the number of containers shipped. They shipped fewer containers but made more money. Part of the reason we're having such high increase in inflation right now is the shipping companies have gone from this time last year, $1,400 for a 40-foot container to be shipped from Asia to the United States to $11,000 for the same container. That's why they've got a 101% increase in revenue on a almost 17% decrease in cargo. Something to keep your eye on. What are logistics costs doing to inflation, and what's driving the inflation or the rise in logistics costs? A couple of pieces of supply chain logistics news today. Pull this first one up here. So everybody wants to push for electric vehicles. Great idea. Some issues there. One, electric vehicles still need electricity to charge them. And right now, our number one source of electricity still appears to be coal-fired electric plants. So we still need fossil fuels to produce electricity to charge our environmentally friendly vehicles. And there's another issue here. Okay? And that's that some of the materials needed for the batteries are in short supply. And it would appear the majority of these sources for the supply of these battery components are actually coming from China, giving them huge leverage over the manufacturing of our electric vehicles. Not a good thing. Excuse me. And here's another piece of information I thought kind of interesting out of today's Wall Street Journal, or excuse me, out of the Supply Chain Management Daily out of Great Britain. And that's that chip makers made an extra $117 billion last year. Now, I'm not normally a jaded person. However, for the past year, we've been talking about the shortage of computer chips, how that's impacted everything in the world from cell phones to automobiles. And yet, revenue increased last year by 25%. $583 billion in revenue for chip makers last year, up from 466 the year before. Again, kind of like the idea of the increased cost of shipping. What's driving, other than supply and demand, and they cut back on the supply so they increase the demand for it, other than that, what's driving this huge increase in revenue for chip makers? Just something to think about. Let's talk about distribution and warehousing. We touched on this a little bit last week when we talked about supply chain. Here's the definition of logistics. and we kind of mentioned this last week, a subset of supply chain. Includes both forward and backwards movement of products. Today, we're going to focus primarily on that warehousing piece, the storage piece, the distribution piece of logistics. So here's the definition of logistics as put forth in the Association for Supply Chain Management's dictionary and their body of knowledge for the certification programs. That's what we're going to focus on today. The activities associated with the movement of material and the storage of material while it's being moved through the system. This is a great time to point out, if y'all are interested, for those who have a little bit of your academic career left after this semester, if you're interested, the Association for Supply Chain Management actually offers a free membership for undergraduates. If you're interested in that, send me an email, I can hook you up. Costs you absolutely nothing. Gives you access to all of their research, access to their job boards, access to their publications. So what is warehousing? Well, here's a couple of definitions I came across for warehousing. Activities related to receiving, storing, and shipping materials. In the warehouse, a place to receive, store, and for extended periods. And that's the critical piece right there that I want to point out between warehouses and distribution centers. Store for extended periods. Warehouses and distribution centers have the exact same functions. So I know some of you are going, well, Joe, if they've got the same functions, why do you keep saying they're different? Right here's the reason. Warehouses tend to store for longer periods of time, store for extended periods. Distribution centers are designed to get the product in, get the product out as quickly as possible. There's a good example of distribution in action, moving stuff from point A to point B. This is in Wichita, Kansas. If you ever have a chance to drive through Kansas, through Wichita on a Friday afternoon, you're probably going to see this, because this is where Spirit AeroSystems ships the bodies for the 737s to Boeing. Special design rail cars. Load them on the rail cars, usually on Friday afternoons, and start shipping them out. It's the distribution piece. This is also distribution. Moving products from point A to point B. As shown here, I saw this truck last time I was driving through Southern California. I'm a huge fan of In-N-Out Burger. A perfect picture of distribution and something that I really enjoy looking at. Couple more videos here for you. I'm not going to waste your time on this video showing you videos within a video. But there's a couple of videos here I think you'll enjoy looking at. The first one is on the Kiva system. The Kiva system is a great invention. Kiva system is not, it's about, I don't know, maybe 24 inches long, about 12, 18 inches wide, and about 6, 8 inches tall. It picks up the rack and it moves the rack to the worker. It reduces the walking back and forth in a distribution center. One study I came across said that the average distribution center worker walks the distance of about Philadelphia to New York 14 times a year. So if you got a Fitbit, like my wife does, and you want to get your steps in, count your steps, get a job in a distribution center. You'll get your steps in every single day. However more steps you want to get in. The Kiva system reduces that walking back and forth. The Kiva system picks up the rack, it brings it to the worker picks the product out of the rack, puts it in the box, confirms they did it, moves on, another one comes in place. It's a short little video, take a look at it. Kiva system, I first saw it in action at the Zappos Distribution Center and the Gilt Group Distribution Centers outside of Louisville, Kentucky. When Amazon saw the Kiva system in action at those two places, Amazon bought them both. And then a year later, Amazon said the Kiva system is only going to be used in Amazon distribution centers. We've tested it in 2 facilities in Southern California. We think it's going to save $250 million a year in productivity cost. Well, it cost them $750 million to buy the company. And the return on investment is $250 million a year. It's going to take less than 3 years. And this was several years ago when the network of Amazon was much smaller than it is today. And then the estimate was going to take only 3 years return on investment. Let's take a look at that. Interesting system. Today, what I want to talk about is different types of distribution centers and facilities. We'll talk about the functions a little bit. The third bullet there, this question keeps coming up. Why do we have to have warehouses and distribution centers in a just-in-time environment? Let's talk about that a second. When I went to my first warehousing distribution conference, 1998, Anaheim, California. Thought I was going to be retiring from the Army soon. After 20 years, wanted to figure out what I want to do next. Boss sent me to the conference, said, learn as much as you can, make as many contacts as you can. Everybody at the conference had a little badge on them with their name and the name of the company they worked for and what their job title was. Kind of impressive. But I saw people running around like Chicken Little, the sky's falling in. This was the first wave of e-commerce, and they're all running around complaining, moaning, groaning that warehouses and distribution centers are going to go away as a result of this new thing called e-commerce. Well, here we are, 24 years later. And guess what? They haven't gone away. They're still around. In fact, there's more of them. In 1998, Amazon didn't own a single warehouse, single distribution center. Now they've got over 500 facilities in their network. The folks running around like Chicken Little with his head cut off and the sky's falling in, they were partially right. Warehousing as we knew it was going away. Distribution centers were becoming the new standard. And the need to have products closer to the customer demanded more facilities. And we'll talk about reverse logistics later in the semester, but that problem dictated also larger facilities to handle stuff coming backwards. Now, I think the last bullet there we answered last week, let's just touch on it again. And this is not something everybody agrees with Joe on, but this is from my decades in the industry. This is my take on it. A warehouse stores for indefinite periods of time. Distribution centers focus on getting the product in, getting the product out as quickly as possible. There's a new iteration of centers out there. It's called a fulfillment center. A fulfillment center is simply a distribution center that only deals with e-commerce. So about an hour south of me is Ottawa, Kansas. In Ottawa, Kansas, American Eagle Outfitters has their distribution center and their fulfillment center. The distribution center supports the stores and the fulfillment center. The fulfillment center only supports American Eagle Outfitters online, e-commerce. So here's the functions within distribution. And we looked at some of these last week when we talked about supply chains in general. Excuse me. When it goes from 58 degrees to -6 in 24 hours, Sometimes my sinuses have issues. Some of y'all may have some of the same problems. So I got a little drainage, so I apologize for the coughing. Transportation is not really part of distribution. It's really a standalone function. But as I mentioned last week, you cannot do distribution without transportation. I was in the Army, and my buddies in the Transportation Corps used to always joke with me and tell me, you know, Joe, nothing happens till something moves. And I thought that was funny until I got to Kuwait and was running that 4.2 million square foot distribution center and discovered that was the fact. I could have the greatest distribution center in the world. I had the largest in the world at 4.2 million square feet. And yet nothing happened if I didn't have transportation supporting me. So it's not really a subset of distribution, but I can't do distribution without transportation. Warehousing is the actual storage of product. Inventory control, critical to make distribution function and function properly. We'll talk about inventory in a few more weeks. Material handling, the moving of the product. How do I do that? Is it automated? Am I using a Kiva system or Kiva-like system? Do I have an old-fashioned distribution center where everybody walks back and forth all the time? Somebody's got to process the orders. Once I receive the product and put it away, I got to do some order processing and then pick the product in order to pack it and ship it to you. Site selection is another function. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the course as well. Where do I put the facility? But that's a consideration I need to think about when I think about customer service and distribution. That's why there are so many Amazon facilities today. Try to get the product as close to the customer as possible. Packaging has become an art and science of its own. There's a packaging partial shipping magazine comes out every month. Different technologies and methodologies for packing the product to ensure that one of those 6 rights we discussed last week, right condition, to ensure that product shows up at the right place in the right condition. And we discussed the communication network last week. We talked about supply chain. I've got to have good communication networks to ensure that I've got good distribution capabilities. That's why Amazon can communicate all the way down to that driver. Ooh, just pulled in front of my neighbor's driveway right now. Communicate all the way down to the driver. UPS can communicate all the way down to the driver delivering packages to your front door. FedEx the same way. Critical to have a good communications network, assured communications, so I can communicate all the way down to the delivery person taking it to your front door. Let's talk about distribution centers. Touched on these a little bit already. So I'm not going to beat all this up. I need to think about several things. Where do I put the facility at? That ties to our discussion we'll have later in the semester on site selection, location analysis. How many facilities do I need? Remember, I think I mentioned before that, maybe I didn't. So I'll mention it again just to make sure. 1999, Amazon decided they wanted to get into the distribution center business. Prior to that, they were a virtual company. They didn't own anything but the website and the technology. In 1999, they decided they needed 6 distribution centers in the United States, 1 in Europe, 1 in Asia, to take care of all their customers. Today, as I'm talking to you, we have 8 Amazon facilities in the greater Kansas City area. They've got a goal to have multiple facilities within 1 hour of every major metropolitan area in the country, because they want to be able to get to the same day, next day, 2-day delivery for everybody. Everything about the layout. We'll talk about the layout when we talk about site selection here in a couple of weeks. I got to think about how am I going to receive the products? That's the critical first step in the distribution center. Properly receiving, properly accounting for the product when it gets into my facility. Where am I going to store it and how am I going to store it? Or put like type items together. Used to have what I called a warehouse within a warehouse, where I put like type items together. So when I had a repair parts distribution center, I created a warehouse within a warehouse concept where I had all the stuff for servicing Humvee in the same location, in the same general area. All the stuff for track vehicles in the same general area. So depending upon the unit that I was supporting, it made it easier to pick the products and get them packaged and kitted up and ready to send out. I think we beat this one up already. They're not interchangeable terms. Warehouses tend to store for longer periods of time. Extended storage. They've got the same functions. They got to receive the product. They got to put it away. They got to store it. They got to pick the orders. They got to ship it. Same functions. I may use my distribution center as a consolidation point to bring in stuff from multiple suppliers and then ship it out to one customer. I think we've already talked about the idea of the fulfillment center already. Here's an example of warehousing. This is Napa, California. This is wine being stored in oak barrels, aged to bottle it, shipped to my house. Maybe shipped to your house or shipped to the local store so you can buy it. This is a good example of early warehousing. This is the wharf, the docks in San Francisco. This is the old East Asia Trading Company. Ship would come in. You see, it's not a very wide berth there. The ship would come in. They could offload it into these warehouses here and store it until somebody needed it, and they can move it out. This is an example of a distribution center in Panama several years ago. Nice and neat, everything in its location. Now, let me spread this out for a second here. So you can see behind me, all that stuff stored everywhere. Not quite as organized as this is here. When it's nice and neatly organized like this, it makes it so much easier to do inventory control and inventory counting and pick the right product so I can ship you the right product. This is a distribution center, not a real good picture because I took this from a camera about 8 years ago and the camera on my phone was not real good at the time. But this is a distribution center in Louisville, Kentucky, right close to the UPS World Port. If you've ever bought a CD or DVD online, and yeah, people still do that. Not everybody still does streaming yet. Or if you've ever bought a CD or DVD in the store, it probably came from here at Alliance. I don't care what store you bought it from. It probably came from Alliance. They stack these things 40 feet high. That's a heck of a CD storage rack. And you notice that all of them aren't full. These things are about 30, no, probably about 40 feet long, 10 feet high. Located close to the UPS World Port facility in Louisville. So if you really have to have a CD by tomorrow morning or a DVD by tomorrow morning, I know some of y'all going, Joe, really? Come on now. How old fashioned is that? Well, folks, trust me, they still do business here. Not everybody streams. If you really have to have that CD by tomorrow morning, you can order up to 10 o'clock at night and have it delivered to you the next day. Personally, if I need that bad, I'm going to download it myself. This is the storage area, the distribution center area of IKEA, close to where I live. If you've ever been to an IKEA, they have this big, huge, hundreds of thousands of square feet of merchandise showroom kind of setup. You write down what you want. You go into the distribution center area here. You put in the computer, and it tells you where it's at. If it's a low-hanging item, like down here at the bottom of the screen here, you can pick it yourself. If it's one of these higher areas here, you've got to get a facility staff to pick it for you. I'll give you some background on warehousing. One of the oldest industries out there. There are writings on the caves from prehistoric times to show where they were doing inventory management and warehousing of food for the winters. Did they have enough stock to get through the winter or not? If you look at the Old Testament, Joseph was running grain warehouses for the Pharaoh in Egypt about 1876 BC. Joseph may be one of the first third-party logistics providers out there. A 3PL is a company that does some aspect of the supply chain as their core competency. Core competency being that thing that you do better than anybody else. Well, Joseph wasn't from Egypt, but he was running the grain warehouses for the Pharaoh. Third-party logistics provider, long before the term was coined. There's documentation of grain warehouses, olive oil warehouses, wine warehouses, called warehouses in Israel about 700 BC. About 323 BC, Alexander the Great really could be considered the father of just in time. When he left Macedonia and started heading out to the west, trying to get to the Far East, he took off with lots of mobile warehousing capability, lots of wagons, full of supplies, full of grain, full of food, full of ammunition. And then here's what he discovered. He discovered that it was taking more wagons to pull the grain to feed the ox that were pulling the wagons for the supplies than it took to pull the wagons for the supplies themselves. More wagons to feed the ox, to pull the wagons, than he had wagons of supplies for his soldiers. So he ate off the ox, turned them into food, got rid of the wagons, went to basically a just-in-time supply system. Now, his just-in-time was a little different from our just-in-time today. His just-in-time was, I come into your country, I conquer your country, I take what I need, and I move on. Venice, Italy, popped up as a warehousing center for the trade between Europe and Asia. If you look at the US West of the Mississippi, even before that, west of the Appalachian Mountains, you got all these little outposts set up. Right here in Kansas, where I'm living now, we've got Fort Hays, Fort Scott, Fort Dodge, Fort Leavenworth, Fort Riley, a couple other little minor forts that popped up that no longer exist. All these little forts also had warehouses attached to them to provide supplies for the settlers as they moved west. Forklifts really started appearing in mass quantities in the 1940s. This is a great invention for warehousing. Prior to that, anything moved in a warehouse was moved by hand. So the only requirement to work in a warehouse was a strong back and a weak mind. So here's some of the challenges facing distribution today. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I want to touch on some of them. Proliferation of SKUs. A SKU is a stock keeping unit. It is an inventory item, for lack of a better term. Every item's got a different stock number, different SKU. As the public wants more and more new products, I got to store more and more stuff in my facility. Now, one of the things we tried to do when I was doing consulting for Sprint was for every new item that came into the system, every new SKU, we tried to identify an old SKU that would go out of the system. We weren't always successful at that, but that was the goal. Try to keep the number of SKUs in the facility a steady state. Customers want the product and they want it now. So now I got to stock my product in more locations to get it to you as quickly as possible. The pull philosophy As we're going to see, we talk just in time in a few weeks. The pull philosophy is just the opposite of the push philosophy. The push philosophy says, I know better what you need than you do. So I'm going to send you what you need. Don't care if you ask for it or not, I'm going to send it to you anyway. The pull philosophy says, I'm only going to send you what you ask for when you ask for it. It's like ordering from Amazon. You go to Amazon and you put something in your cart. Usually they say, Joe, people who bought this, they also bought this, they bought this, they bought this. They don't put this, this, and this in your cart. They're just trying to get that upsell. They only send you what you put in your cart and you pay for. That's the push system. Actually, that's the pull system. The push system would have been people who bought this also bought this, and this, and this. So I'm going to put all three of these in your cart and send them to you. If you don't want them, just send them back. Creates a lot of excess work. Not very efficient. This last one down here in red. This is an interesting thing in distribution center world. In 1945, at the end of World War II, the biggest complaint in the warehousing world back then, we hadn't invented distribution centers yet, the biggest complaint in the warehousing world was that the majority of the workers did not speak English as a primary language. Well, pretty easy to figure out why. Millions of folks went off to war. Somebody had to work in the facilities. Immigrants came in, took the jobs. Keep the facilities running. Got it. Makes sense. But what bothers me is last year, one of the biggest complaints in the warehousing distribution center world was the majority of the workers don't speak English. 80 years, we haven't solved the problem yet. So what's causing it now? We aren't at war. What's causing it is, and this is just Joe's theory. What's causing it is people don't want to work for $9, $10, $12 an hour. We've become, in some cases, too good to work in menial labor. And we have folks coming in the country on a regular basis from other countries. They're going, $10 an hour? Yeah. I made $1.25 doing this back home. I had a guy working for me in a distribution center in Kuwait who had a doctorate. He was from Sri Lanka. He was making about $6 an hour at the time. And he was tickled to death because with his PhD in Sri Lanka, the best he could make was about $4 a day. So if people come to this country who are willing to do these jobs. So my recommendation to folks is learn a second language. Let me give a quick example. So one of the things I came across when I first started consulting was I got a call from a company in Southern California. They said, Joe, we're going to be honest with you up front. We may have the worst distribution center in America. They weren't far from wrong. But the biggest problem was the distribution center was connected to the corporate headquarters. On that side of the wall, in the corporate headquarters, nobody spoke any Spanish. Southern California, and nobody spoke any Spanish. On this side of the wall, 95% of the workers spoke Spanish as their primary language. Go figure, who would have thought that? Southern California, people speaking Spanish? Oh my God. Who would have thought? Well, anybody with a brain would have thought that. So what was happening was the people on that side of the wall would give instructions and they didn't always get translated properly. So my Spanish is horrible. It used to be tolerable. Now it's horrible. Even after spending 2 weeks in Panama again this year, it's still, my Spanish is still horrible. I can read it and understand it fair. I can speak it poorly. I can understand it as long as you don't speak fast and you give me a second to translate it. In other words, I'm not real good at Spanish. But before I went down to look at this facility, I got a DVD. I got a DVD instead of CDs. I put the CDs in my car. I listened to these things everywhere I went. Time I was driving, I was listening to Spanish. Spanish for business. I'm talking to myself in Spanish in the car. People think I'm crazy because it was still early in the days of Bluetooth. So people thought I was talking to myself. They thought I was crazy, and they may not have been wrong. But I'm trying to learn Spanish enough to at least communicate when I get down there, because I suspected, and I was correct, that the majority of the workers spoke Spanish. So I walked to the facility the first day, told the facility manager, we need to do the following things today. Costs nothing to do this. We need to start doing the following things today, and it will see some immediate impacts. He gets all the workers together. He tells them in Spanish what they got to do. We get through him telling him, I'm like, okay, so Bubba, what about this and this and this? You didn't say that. His chin hit the floor. He's like, Joe, you speak Spanish. Un poquito. And he's muy malo. I speak a little bit, and when I do speak, it's very bad. But I thought I should hear the following things, and I didn't. So let's get everybody back together and tell them again. This is what we got to do. Okay? He goes, Joe, nobody on that side of the door speaks Spanish. Yeah, I figured that out. So basically what I do is I tell them what I think they need to hear. And what I told him was basically, if you work for me, what you need to hear is you're fired. Because you need to tell them exactly what those folks are telling you if you want to have a successful distribution center. Here's some other challenges. Returns. Now, this is the IKEA close to where I live. They've got 2 elevators that only go up to the returns and exchange area. There's an elevator and an escalator over here that goes up to the showroom, and then I can buy stuff. But there's 2 of them dedicated just to the returns area. This is a huge challenge in distribution center world. So I've got to carve out a space in my facility to handle reverse logistics. So we're going to talk about this in greater detail here in a few weeks. Anything about customer service. Everything I do in the warehousing distribution center world needs to be focused on customer service. Inventory accuracy is critical. The better I can do inventory accuracy, the better I can take care of the customer. Talk about that a little more when we get to inventory in a few weeks. I got to keep the place looking neat. I showed you that one facility, everything was nice and neat. It was stretch wrapped. It was in the right location. I do several things when I work with facilities. One I call name the aisle. Every facility's got the same layout. Row A, row B, row C, row D, section, aisle 1, 2, 3, 4, A11 location, A12 location, A21. Instead of having just the aisle A, I take the team leader responsible for that aisle, and I put his or her name on there. I put all the team members' names on that aisle. I start putting data of how many picks per hour they're doing, data on inventory accuracy. I put pictures of the customers up there. Try anything to try to build a little pride in that location there. So here's the functions. We talked about these before. These are the functions within a warehouse. These are the functions within a distribution center. The difference in these functions is right here in red, the storage time. How long do I store it? Without sounding redundant, warehouses store for longer periods of time. All these functions feed some things we looked at before: we'll look at in the future. We looked at perfect order fulfillment last week. The better I do putting stuff in the right place, receiving it, putting it away in the right place, properly storing it, properly picking it, the better the chance I'm going to deliver to you the right product at the right place, in the right quantity, in the right condition. Carrying cost is what it costs to keep it on the shelf. We're going to look at this in greater detail later when we talk about inventory management. Risk. The better I do these functions in receiving it properly, putting it away properly, storing it properly, packing it properly after I pick it, the better the chances are that I'm going to be able to account for my product and it's going to show up in the right condition. Loss, employee theft, huge issue. Depending on which study you look at, somewhere between 25 and $50 billion a year stolen at distribution centers in this country alone. Let's look at some different types of facilities. Within the food world, I've got cold storage, I've got dry storage, I've got wet storage. Okay? Cold storage is exactly what it says. Wet storage is usually stuff that goes into the freezer area. And I've got dry storage. Canned goods. They need to be temperature controlled, but don't need to be put into a refrigerated condition. I've got general supplies facilities, repair parts facilities, clothing distribution centers, may have just like specific products, like Zappos, nothing there but shoes and accessories. May have long-term storage facilities, short-term storage facilities. I've got private facilities and public facilities. Private, I own it. Like this QVC facility here in the picture, I own it. Everything in it is mine. Everybody working there works for me. I got control. Now, there's a built-in assumption here that I've got enough volume in my operations to justify having my own facility. I may not need my own facility if I only got a few products. I got fixed costs, but I got to maintain the facility. I've got control because it's mine. I got flexibility. I can lay it out any way I want to. If I take care of my workers, I have this intangible benefit of employee pride. I got the tax benefits, but I write off the building of the facility, I write off the equipment in the facility, and I depreciate the facility once it's open, so I get some tax benefits. Public facilities, I own it, anybody can use it. Third-party logistics provider warehouse. Dale has their supplier support center across the street from their facility in Texas. In this facility, if you're a supplier to Dell, you've got to lease space in there and store 6 to 8 weeks worth of supply there. It's kind of like the public storage facilities you see all over the place. You only lease what you need. You look at third-party logistics providers, that's what they do. They run the warehousing function, distribution center function for companies who decided they don't want to do that. In fact, the fastest growing segment of UPS is UPS Supply Chain Services, where they run distribution centers as a third-party provider. The advantage of these public facilities is I don't need to have my own facility. I'm going to get somebody whose core competency is actually running these facilities. They've got specific knowledge of running facilities. Because of the fact that I'm only leasing the space I need, the downside is that space may not be available when I need it. So I may find myself leasing the facility when I don't need it to ensure that it's there when I need it. There's a function within the distribution world called cross-docking. Now, Walmart will tell you they invented cross-docking. They didn't invent it, they perfected it. Cross-docking has been around for a while. It's a temporary transfer point. The items never go into inventory. Now, this is the Kohl's distribution center in Independence, Missouri. It's a cross-docking facility. Nothing stays in the facility more than 12 hours unless there's a problem. Comes in, it goes to a staging area, goes on a truck, goes out. requires world-class transportation, world-class communications. I've got to coordinate my inbound logistics and my outbound logistics to ensure I've got the right stuff coming in and the right assets going out. It dates back to the Pony Express days out of St. Joe, Missouri. Those Bubbas took off with 3, 4, 5 different saddlebags on their horse. They had advanced shipping notification via telegraph at the time. Bubba's going to show up. He's got stuff going to 5 locations. They need to have 5 riders at the next location to take those saddlebags and move out. Usually cross-docking stuff stays in the facility less than 48 hours. It comes in, goes to a staging area, goes out. It reduces my inventory costs because it reduces my inventory value because it never goes on the shelf. It increased my inventory turns, we'll talk about later, because it never goes on the shelf, but it's part of my cost of goods sold. Again, world-class coordination with my inbound and my outbound shippers. I need to know what's coming in. I need to know what needs to go out. So instead of bringing it in, putting it on the shelf, it comes in, off the truck, into a staging area, onto an outbound truck. This is my facility in Kuwait. Averaged about 120 trucks a day coming in. I knew what was coming in. So I knew what I had to ship out the next day. So I had to coordinate the inbound shipments and the outbound shipments. My advanced shipping notification came from RFID tags. I knew what was on every single pallet based upon this RFID tag, and I knew when it left the States, when it arrived in Kuwait, when it came in the front gate of my distribution center. I think I beat these up already. Here's a cross-docking facility in Southern California. This thing's about, I don't know, about 30 yards wide. Trucks come in off, this is very close to a Union Pacific rail area. Trucks come in with the containers, they back up to the door. They unload the containers. There are trucks waiting on the other side to be loaded. It goes to the staging area, goes on the truck, out the door, less than 24 hours. Never gets stored. So we look at different types of facilities today. Primarily focused on public versus private. We focus on the idea of the difference between a warehouse and distribution center. Again, without sounding redundant, warehouses store for indefinite periods of time. Warehousing is the function of storing, whether it's in a warehouse or distribution center or fulfillment center. I need to have warehouses and distribution centers to store product. Distribution centers focus on getting the product in and getting the product out to the customer as quickly as possible. So I need to know where my customer base is in order to put the distribution center in the right place. We looked at cross-docking, world-class communications, world-class transportation, world-class collaboration. In the facility, to a staging area, out the door, 48 hours or less. Never goes on the shelf. And we looked at some historical examples, all the way back to prehistoric times. Take a look at the reading material. Got a little more information in it. Take a look at the discussion board. Y'all doing a great job so far. I've been really impressed with the time and the thought and the effort y'all put into what we've done so far. So stay focused. We've got an exam next week. I'll do another video for the exam review and post it for you to help focus you for the exam. Have a great day. Have a great week. Stay focused. Stay healthy. Till I see you again. Have a great day.